Welcome to another edition of the Countdown to Tampa Bay here on Jeremy Speaks on Wrestling on Spreaker. If you are also watching on YouTube, I would like to welcome you as well. I got to start mentioning that these episodes will be posted to YouTube 2 days after the initial upload date. So if you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, share, subscribe, comment, and criticize. It is all welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to something I may have to say about wrestling. Now, this is the 4th episode of our Countdown to Tampa Bay series, where we'll be talking about WrestleMania 3. This countdown series is kind of the countdown timer. I've lit the fuse as far as going to Tampa Bay into WrestleMania, and that's exactly what this countdown represents. I'm going to cover every WrestleMania up until the day of WrestleMania. Following that WrestleMania in Tampa Bay, I will be doing a live show immediately following. I will be present at WrestleMania 36 in Tampa Bay, so it makes it mean all the more. But like I stated earlier, like, share, subscribe, comment, criticize. You can follow me on Facebook at Jeremy Speaks. You can follow me on Instagram at Jeremy Speaks on Wrestling, and at Twitter at Jeremy Speaks. I'm on all 3 of those platforms. Share my episodes. I have a lot more that you can't see because my trial period ran out with Spreaker, and all the episodes I uploaded, they kept. But you can find me primarily on Spreaker. I have another podcast that I do called Jeremy Speaks On. It's kind of my social commentary when I feel like ranting about the way things are in the current world. Those episodes will be exclusively to Spreaker. The wrestling episodes will be uploaded to my channel on YouTube, the Negro Sports League, not the Jeremy Speaks channel. All of my wrestling content from here on out will be uploaded to the Negro Sports League channel. Now that we've got that out the way, WrestleMania 4, the first WrestleMania to take place at Trump Plaza in Atlantic City. Now, if you saw the thumbnail over on social media, you kind of know I probably threw a couple of you off. And that was totally the intent, was to throw you off. I know most people, when they see the last name Trump, they kind of get excited or whatnot. So that is definitely a strategy behind that. But, I mean, I can't help what the WrestleManias took place. What has happened has happened. Even though it's hard to watch WrestleMania 4, because if the hard cam that's facing the ring, you can look right across and see the 45th president of the United States. So, yeah. But you can get past that fact. You know, if watching an old WrestleMania and seeing somebody who you don't like today upset you, then that's just too bad. You know, I won't get off into the political stuff as much. I did use the thumbnail to kind of shock and get people's attention, and if it did that, good. But this is not a video about Donald Trump. We got enough of that shit going on now. This is a video about him hosting WrestleMania in Atlantic City. He hosted the 4th annual WrestleMania, which took place on March 27th, 1988, at the historic Atlantic City Convention Hall in Atlantic City, New Jersey. The attendance of the event was 19,199, and they drew a 6.5 buy rate on pay-per-view. Now, for those of you that don't know, WrestleMania 4 went head-to-head with Clash of the Champions that night. Clash of the Champions was on TBS. It drew a 6.5 buy rate, which is saying something, because that's like 7-8 million people that paid for it. You know, so Vince was eating. He was eating back then. He's still eating now, but like, to be a guy who just kind of forced wrestling into the mainstream consciousness and to take off like this. Now, he stated that he mortgaged his house, and he would have had to mortgage the kids too to pay for the first WrestleMania. That was with the $1 million that he received from Crockett. But by the time he gets to 4, you got people who want the event to come to their city because of what it means as far as the economy. You got to think, 19,000 people from all over the world. I'm not even going to say all over the world at that point. I don't think WrestleMania was a global thing at that point. But you got all these people coming into one town. It does affect the economy. Me going to Tampa Bay, the money that I use from the job that I have to keep the lights on, the money that I use from that is going to go into that economy because I'm going to eat and feed people while I'm there. No. So I imagine that in Atlantic City in 1988, it was no different. Nothing exceeds like excess. Anyway, it was a 14 man single elimination tournament for the undisputed WWF Heavyweight Championship. There were some matches on the undercard. As far as like plot and as far as just the way this WrestleMania went is different. You can kind of get lost in watching it, right? Like, I totally got lost in watching it because it's a 14-man tournament, right? Now, all the competitors don't necessarily compete in the tournament, but it's a 14-man tournament. That's a lot. That's a tournament for a WrestleMania is long. A tournament for any show is long, like the Cruiserweight Classic. If they had done all 16 of those matches in an episode, it would have taken 4 hours. So imagine that at a WrestleMania. And that really makes for a long WrestleMania. I actually found this interesting. When I was researching this, I started to see taglines. WrestleManias started to have taglines. And all the way, I can remember all the way up until 20, they kind of had taglines. After 21, when they went Hollywood. 22 didn't really have anything except a good show to put on. It wasn't really that much celebrity involvement, and Eddie had died. So this WrestleMania's tagline is what the world is watching. And I don't really think it was global. I think Vince was trying to push it as a global thing, but, who knows? You would have had more than 20,000 people there. These WrestleManias in the beginning, they took place as the big shows because there weren't as many pay-per-views back then as there are now. I mean, like every month is like a pay-per-view or a new pay-per-view or, it's something constantly going on the network as far as special events. They call them special events now. Well, at some point, Survivor Series would come into the picture, and then the Royal Rumble would come into the picture, and SummerSlam. I think SummerSlam was going on that year. At one point, it was only 4 pay-per-views that could, WWE put on a year. Eric Bischoff would change that later. Now, when they were promoting the event, they used the rivalry of Andre and Hogan. Like, back in the 80s, rivalries would go for like months and months. It ain't like current wrestling today. Rivalries would go from year to year. Like, they started this WrestleMania in the main event by planting the seeds for a rivalry. But more on that later. This event was broadcast across closed circuit television to 175,000 homes on pay-per-view, which doesn't sound like a lot now, but considering the times and the technology, you couldn't just cut on a YouTube back then. Like, you had to actually go somewhere and pay. Closed circuit television was like prehistoric pay-per-view. If you don't remember pay-per-view, A, that says something about my age, and B, that says something about your age. But closed circuit television was like the wheel before the wheel, right? Like, it was the blueprint for what would go on to become pay-per-view. So getting it in 175,000 homes, did a 6.5 buy rate. It was down from the previous year. The previous year was 8.0, but, they had 100,000 people in the building. It's different. But Andre and Hogan faced off in the previous year's event. They would face each other in this tournament. I think Andre's mindset going into this tournament, or at least in my opinion, Andre's whole mindset was to be the catalyst to get Hogan out of the tournament, because who else was big enough to stop Hogan from advancing in the tournament? Hogan was going, at that time, Hulkamania was hot, like white hot. Who was going to stop Hogan from going all the way through the tournament? Right? That's what I think Andre was in there for. But, Andre and Hogan had started with that trophy last year, the year before at WrestleMania 3. See, that's how long term they used to plan. Nowadays you can't do that because everything's on the internet and nobody can keep a secret anymore. Like, information is definitely going to be free nowadays. So imagine trying to hold a long term deal together for a year nowadays. I don't think it would work. I don't know. I would like to see booking go back to where they could do it in a year. They did have a lower card. Brutus Beefcake was challenging for the Intercontinental Championship that the Honky Tonk Man had. And the Ultimate Warrior and Hercules, the blind leading the blind. It was terrible. It was terrible. But Gladys Knight sung America the Beautiful. Which is crazy to me because Vince always has had, he had Ray Charles at 2. Mean Gene sung it at the first one. He didn't take it seriously, so I'm assuming that's why Vince went and got him an actual entertainer. WrestleMania 2, Ray Charles sung the national anthem. WrestleMania 3, Aretha Franklin sung the national anthem. And WrestleMania 4, Gladys Knight sung America the Beautiful. So you kind of see, you could play both sides of that fence and say one thing or feel one way or feel another. But like I said, this ain't a political podcast. I actually have one of those already. But Gladys Knight did open the show, and following her rendition of America the Beautiful, the first match that took place was a 20-man battle royal, and the winner would receive a large trophy. Basically, think of the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. And this is basically what it was. Lower to mid-card guys. Some guys might get a push. Some guys might not. Bad News Brown was in the match. Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov. The Hart Foundation, which consisted of Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. The Killer Bees. Danny Davis. George the Animal Steel. Harley Race. Hillbilly Jim. The Fabulous Rougeaus. The Young Stallions, which, looking back at it now, Paul Roma. And Paul Roma was a horseman, for anybody who don't know. Anyway, Junkyard Dog, Ken Patera, Ron Bass, Sam Houston, and Sika. For those of you who don't know who Sika is a Samoan, and he is related to that Anawai tree that continues to go on today. That Anawai tree is deep. It goes all the way back to the first couple of WrestleManias. 14 eliminations would occur, and I'm not going to go through the list all of them, but the final 6 participants were Bret Hart, Paul Roma, Harley Race, Jacques Rougeau, and the Junkyard Dog. Race would hit a back body drop on Rougeau, which sent him over the top rope before JYD punched him over the top rope. And that was one of the differences between WWE and WCW back then. When WWE would send you over the top rope, it wasn't a disqualification. Like, if you threw somebody over the top rope in WCW, it was a disqualification. Strange rule. Very, very strange rule. Well, I guess psychologically you had to do something behind the referee's back. But, it's a disqualification. You could clothesline a guy over the top rope and the match would be over. Anyway, Brown would dump out Paul Roma as JYD, of course, who was more over than Hogan for a couple of years. That can't be disputed. You can go back and watch the reaction to JYD and watch the reaction to Hogan. That cannot be disputed. No matter how much they want to edit it out, and they can do that now. But if you go back and you watch the original, which I implore you to do, don't watch the network version of it. Watch something on YouTube first. JYD was over. Super over. Brown, Bad News Brown, would dump out Roma, and him and Bret Hart would get together, and they double team JYD. They would beat him up, put the boots to him for a while. JYD sidestepped Brown at one point, and Hart was hit with the clothesline. JYD hit both men with several headbutts before they decided to cooperate, and then they eliminated JYD. Hart decided that he and Brown would share the trophy, but of course, Bad News Brown, being who he was, his name is Bad News Brown. Let's keep it real. Which I want to go out on a limb and say Bad News Brown was a pretty legit guy, man. Dude won tournaments and stuff. He was an actual judo champion. How that translated to wrestling, we'll leave that up to whoever witnessed Bad News Brown wrestle. But he would hit Bret Hart with a ghetto blaster, which was his finishing move. For those who don't know what a ghetto blaster was, one of those big stereos we used to carry on our shoulders back in the 80s. Once again, showing my age. But it was a ghetto blaster. He eliminated Bret, and he won the Royal Rumble. Not the Royal Rumble, the actual Battle Royal. And Brown was presented with the trophy, but of course, as with most trophies in WWE or wrestling period, it was destroyed. And that would lead to a babyface turn for Bret, which Bret was coming into his own. A lot of guys do the whole Rumble thing early in their career. This was the 4th consecutive WrestleMania for Bret Hart, which, he would go on to set a record with that later. More on that around WrestleMania 13 and 14. The 14-man tournament for the WWF Championship began. In the first round, Ted DiBiase defeated Jim Duggan, Don Morocco defeated Dino Bravo, and Randy Savage defeated Butch Reed. Greg the Hammer Valentine will also go on to defeat Ricky Steamboat. One Man Gang would defeat Bam Bam Bigelow, and Rick Rude fought Jake Roberts to a time limit draw, basically eliminating both of them. The winners advanced from the quarterfinals, while Rude and Roberts were both eliminated from the tournament. Andre and Hogan were given buys, and they directly qualified for the quarterfinals, which, with them being former champions, I get the idea behind the booking. I get the idea behind why that would make sense then. Doesn't make much sense now, but you could spin that storyline to work now for somebody like a Roman Reigns or anybody really. The Ultimate Warrior would make his pay-per-view debut, and he would face Hercules. And like I stated earlier, this match was, it's the blind leading the blind, man. Like, if you had a Warrior in there with somebody like Ravishing Rick Rude, or you had Hercules in there with somebody like Coco Beware, they could kind of guide him and make them look good and make them look as though they could keep up with the dance. But when you put two people in there who aren't good without dancing partners with each other and nobody's leading, it really isn't good. If I had to give this match a star, I would give it half a star. It was the big, muscled up, jacked up guys doing whatever they could do. It was clumsy, too. Warrior would counter one of Hercules' clotheslines, hit a clothesline on his own. The match would spill to the outside, and he would beat on Hercules outside the ring. The Warrior would get in and hit him with a forearm, throw him in the corner. Warrior would hit 10-count punches on Hercules, but Hercules would make a comeback with an inverted atomic drop. That atomic drop was deadly in the 80s. The finish was a half Nelson suplex in which Hercules hit the suplex and both men's shoulders were on the mat. But Warrior would get his shoulder up first as the referee counted 3, therefore winning. If you debut on pay-per-view back in the day, you rarely lost. The quarterfinals started. After that match, the quarterfinals would start, and Hogan would take on Andre. This went about as good as matches go as far as Hogan and Andre. The 80s were hard to look at, right? But I will get to the meat of it. They both hit each other with chairs. And they both got disqualified, which makes sense because you want to crown a new champion, right? You want to use the momentum off of the two guys who were previous champions, which technically Andre wasn't. But you want to use that momentum to propel the tournament, right? So I'm assuming that's what they did. Honestly, it worked out better without Hogan and Andre in it. That should have been the moment to crown somebody new and to push a new guy. More on that later. Ted DiBiase would defeat Don Morocco, and Randy Savage would defeat Greg the Hammer Valentine, while One Man Gang received a bye due to Rick Rude's and Jake Roberts wrestling to a time limit draw in the first round. Brutus the Beefcake would take on, after this match, Brutus the Beefcake would take on the Honky Tonk Man for the title. That atomic drop, that started in the beginning of the matchup. That deadly atomic drop, something about it, right? Beefcake would then hit Honky Tonk with a high knee. He missed an elbow drop on Honky Tonk, who took control with a second turnbuckle fist drop. There must be something in the Lawlers that made them do that. He went for the shake, rattle, and roll, but Beefcake kneed him in the face. He went to the top rope to do some high flying, but Beefcake once again hooked the top rope and clothesline Honky before applying a sleeper hold. Jimmy Hart would just tee off on the referee and just hit him. He hit him. He didn't pull punches. He threw that megaphone with intent and with malice and intent to harm. Honky Tonk would retain. He was still champion. The bell didn't ring because Beefcake won by disqualification. Keep both guys strong. I told you back in the day, guys were strong. They were big on their spots, man. Like, they didn't like to give up their spots. And the older and the more prone you were to be put out the pasture, the more you wanted to hang on to what you had. Randy Savage would face One Man Gang for a place in the final. Ted DiBiase had already received a final. He had already received a bye into the final due to the double disqualification of Hogan and Andre. Hey, that's how it happens, right? And it told a story. One Man Gang would dominate the majority of the match, but after he attempted a 747 splash, he missed Savage, and Savage, of course, went to the top rope after One Man Gang rolled up to the outside. He would hit a double axe handle. Savage would then go for a scoop slam. One Man Gang had his manager out there. It was Slick. One Man Gang, by the way, is Akeem the African Dream, a white guy from South Carolina who, anyway, with that, more on that in WrestleMania 6. Thought it was pretty funny. Slick would throw One Man Gang the cane. One Man Gang would use the cane on Savage, therefore getting disqualified. Macho Man would advance to the final. Before the final round, Strikeforce defended the WWF Tag Team Championships against Demolition, Axe, and Smash with Mr. Fuji in their corner. Santana would grab Mr. Fuji up on the apron. The match was your typical 80s wrestling tag match. But Demolition was over. Strikeforce, really? Vince should have applied a trademark on that back in the 80s. Santana, of course, took the heat. Santana always took the heat. Martel drop kicked both Axe and Smash a number of times. He put the Boston Crab on Smash. Santana grabbed Mr. Fuji up on the apron, which allowed Axe to get the manager's cane. He nailed Martel with the cane as Smash covered Martel with the pin. And as a result, Demolition won the match and the WWE Tag Team Championships. The main event of WrestleMania 4 was the tournament for the final to crown the Vacated had the title at the time. Vacated has more championships than anybody in history, by the way. Vacated is the undisputed all-time champion when it comes to that. But the main event was for that title between Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase, two second-generation wrestlers, I want to point out. Savage, of course, was tired because he wrestled One Man Gang, and DiBiase had a bye. He's a heat. He dominated most of the match, like you would expect the heel to do, a proper heel. Nowadays, you can't even tell who the heels are. DiBiase was accompanied by Andre the Giant, which is not surprising considering he sold the belt to him the year before. He was accompanied by Andre the Giant, and Savage had Miss Elizabeth. Now, Savage had already wrestled 3 matches, but, that's the way the cookie crumbles when you're trying to get somebody over. Savage could go 3 matches. Savage could probably go 33 matches at the time. Savage made a comeback. He attempted a top rope elbow, and when Savage hit that elbow, you rarely got up unless you were Ultimate Warrior. More on that in WrestleMania 7. He went for that elbow, and DiBiase moved out of the way. DiBiase would apply the $1 Million Dream on Savage, and that this part of the match kind of makes me mad. This match didn't need any salad dressing. This match didn't need any posing at the end of the match. But of course, Hogan not being involved in the main event, Hogan had to be involved in the main event. So, Hogan was brought out to the ring. And I know the way they used Elizabeth to bring him out. Okay, I get that part. But Hogan really did not need to be in the main event of the show. He had just main evented last year in front of the largest crowd in North American sports history, right? Indoor sports history. He had just main evented. This match did not need him in it. It was Macho Man's turn, right? It was Macho Man's turn. The creation of the mega powers, mega whatever. Savage went back and got Hogan to neutralize Andre being at ringside. And Andre would interfere in the match while the referee was distracted. But then Hogan, who was never a face, would grab a steel chair and attack DiBiase. Hogan wasn't a face. I hate when people think that Hogan's a face. Hogan was never a face. Hogan was always a heel. What face do you know would rake somebody's eyes or scratch their backs or anything like that? What face do you know would do that? It's just my personal opinion. Anyway, he did hit DiBiase with a chair, but Hogan could get away with that. Savage would then go up to the top rope for a second elbow. And of course, in the 80s, when Savage hit you with that elbow, you weren't getting up. He would pin Ted DiBiase. He would win the tournament and the vacant WWF World Heavyweight Championship. And of course, after the match, we had to do 9 minutes of posing, and I'm not a fan of Hogan's. I've never been. But this match did not need Hogan in it whatsoever. Overall, it was a good WrestleMania, in my opinion, you know, if you like tournaments. Of course, they made tournaments interesting by, you know, sticking to the script and just making, they used the buys and they used the double disqualification. They used them properly to the point where the whole show wasn't oversaturated with it. And the match could have been good without Hogan and Andre at ringside, but I get them trying to give the rub. That's great. Overall, this was Savage's moment. And the show could have been so much better if the tournament had been trimmed down to 8 guys from 14, but I'm nitpicking here. It's a good race. It was WrestleMania. It was WrestleMania 4. It was one of the first times I believe they had WrestleMania access. But overall, WrestleMania 4, good show. If they would have just trimmed the tournament down. A lot of people gave it bad ratings, but whatever, you know, it was what it was, and it was in its infancy still. It was still kind of brand new. You know, you couldn't top 93,000 people in a stadium just yet. You know, once you've done that, you got to have a massive, massive marketing and promotion scheme behind it to do it again. And they would go on to do it again. But that's going to do it for this episode of Countdown to Tampa Bay, WrestleMania 3. I have been Jeremy Speaks. This has been Jeremy Speaks on Wrestling. Like, share, subscribe, comment, criticize. It is all welcome as long as you listen. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to my podcast. It will be up on YouTube in 2 days. Go on the Negro Sports League. Go over there, like, share, subscribe, comment, and criticize as well. Follow me on Spreaker, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I've been Jeremy Speaks. Peace.